Good evening, and I'm the 100 Proof News Hound, and we're here for the 100 Years and More show. This is one of our regular episodes, so we're going back exactly 100 years to March of 1925. Real potpourri here this episode. We'll be talking about the weather. We're going to be talking about some great American disaster, some social issues, technology, and even Hollywood. There's a tiny bit of true crime as well. We're going to start off with some technical innovations, and let's see where we go from there. Wichita Eagle, March 2nd, 1925. Telephone wires transmit photos over 3,600 miles. Well, if you remember the fax machine, and if you thought that was the originator of having the ability to send documents or photographs over telephone lines, you'd have been about 60 years too late, because in 1925, it was noted that last May, photographs were successfully sent over telephone wires. Now pictures have been sent simultaneously to several cities throughout America. 7 minutes required to send pictures to Chicago and San Francisco. Translation of photographs over telephone wires 3,600 miles long simultaneously to 3 cities was tested here today by the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, AT&T, and declared a success. It was noted that it took only 7 minutes to send the photographs coast to coast. That's interesting. You know, when you think about it, I believe that this machine was the trope used in several movies, usually with an accused killer in the police station or newspaper office, and his photograph slowly being sent in from Los Angeles or San Francisco. I don't know why it didn't catch on with the public imagination, because I certainly thought that the fax machine was the originator of the process, but I guess I was wrong too. It was noted that the demonstration was arranged by the officials as a final test before announcing establishment of a general transcontinental picture transmission service. And you're going to see here that within a month, it was actually up and operating. It was noted that it's possible to transmit a picture 5 by 7 inches, which ordinary development at the receiving end is practically indistinguishable from ordinary photographs. Also, and this is an interesting thing, it may be used with radio. This is the process. The film is inserted in the transmitter in cylindrical form, and a beam of light is passed through at a uniform speed, reproducing the picture on a photoelectric cell. The light beam passes through the film and moves over the surface, much as a phonograph needle circles a record. Intricate machinery, notice that they can't describe it, intricate machinery, transfers the light ray to an electric current in a telephone line, and in turn at the receiving end, the current is transferred to another light ray, which reproduces the photograph on an exposed film. This is really high-tech stuff. This is no phony baloney stuff. This is like a real scientific process. Regarding the proposed transcontinental service, officials said the same system could be used in transmitting photographs by radio, when atmospheric conditions are such that steadiness of transmission and freedom from interference can be assured. You know what transmission of photographs by radio is called? It's called television. So this is the television in its infancy, the same technology. It's front page technology. This is real stuff. Now, the next story we're going to deal with actually uses this technology as part of the reporting. But first off, I want to tell you that this is a story which has to be impossible. Has to be impossible, because we all know that because of global warming and climate change, that the storms that we experience today are far stronger than anything that would have happened in the past. And that it's only as a result of human interference in the environment that we have storms at all. So I'm going to talk to you today about this impossible storm, because it was the strongest and largest series of tornadoes ever experienced in the history of the United States. And it took place on March 19th, 1925. It was a series of storms, and in one case, just a gigantic mile-wide tornado moving through Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee. The storm developed over south-central Missouri around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The storm moved from Missouri into Illinois. It hit Gorham, the town of Gorham, killing more than half the population. The storm at that point was moving 60 miles per hour. It was a Category 4, but probably a Category 5 storm, which means the winds were about 260 miles per hour. At that rate, that's really the jet stream in contact with the surface of the earth. Winds of that level destroy everything. Homes will be ripped out of their foundations. It can rip the tar off a road. That's how powerful a 260 mile an hour wind is. The storm continued on through Murfreesboro, which was a town of 10,000. It leveled the entire town and killed 250 people, including 35 people at a railroad repair shop and 17 children at the local school. It then went to DeSoto, obliterating the town and killing 118. The storm continued through West Frankfort, Caldwell, and Parrish, killing scores more. The tornado then plowed into Indiana, destroying the town of Griffin, killing 50. And the tornado, along with associated tornadoes, continued to churn into Kentucky and Tennessee, killing 47 people in those states. Amazingly, according to the Zanesville, Ohio Times Recorder, photos telephoned across the country tell graphic story of destruction. It says men in San Francisco and New York are looking at pictures from the tornado belt at the same time you are, thanks to the new invention which makes it possible to transmit photos over telephone wires. This picture, taken in West Frankfort, Illinois, was flashed from coast to coast and received in New York in this condition. So there was almost an instantaneous application of technology. Within 3 weeks, they announce it, and they're using it on a monumental national disaster. And how monumental was it? Well, we've got the storm casualty listed by states. 682 people died in Illinois, 250 in Murfreesboro, 107 in West Frankfort, 118 in DeSoto, 90 in Gorham. Those are plane crashes. Those are statistics and numbers from a plane crash. But this is from a single tornado. 23 in the town of Parrish. If we go to Indiana, 50 died in Griffin, 20 in Princeton, 93 total in the state. 26 in Missouri died, 17 in Kentucky, and 30 in the town of Gallatin in Tennessee. That's death and destruction on a scale that I don't know that we would accept today. I mean, I don't know what we would do. I guess houses are better built, and we have, most importantly, we have the early warning system so that people can get into their homes, can get into their basements. But from an F5, there's not a lot of places to hide. You basically have to flee, and unless you've got several minutes' notice, you've got no chance. Well, as always with disasters, there's tales of heroism, tragedy, and tales of generosity. One of the tragedies here is a boy of 3 is unclaimed, according to the Brooklyn Eagle. In the hospital at City Hall in West Frankfort is a 3-year-old boy, his arm broken, who has not yet been claimed by any of the refugees. He was found on the outskirts of the devastated area. Attendants were unable to understand the lad when he tried to tell them his name, but he's sure his parents will call for him. Nurses have not told him there are several unknowns in the morgue. Nation headline of the Richmond item of Richmond, Indiana. Nation rallies to aid stricken. Planes carry serum to hit tetanus peril. There was the thought that because of all of the debris flying about that there could be an outbreak of tetanus. So the vaccine was sent there by air. Another headline, citizens form army of relief at Evansville. As always in disaster this time, the country comes together, does what they can, be it physically going to the site of the disaster to help or through donations. It's noted here, death toll is greatest of any storm disaster with 848 dead and 2,909 injured. With respect to individual tales, Mr. and Mrs. Frank Bell and their 2 children of New Frankfort were in their small home when the tornado struck. We just hung on to the table. The house was lifted off its foundation and bumped down again, but we were not hurt. Another gentleman noted, next he asserted his car was tossed into the air and carried off with his wife and children in it. He was also lifted and blown 5 blocks, alighting uninjured on the Illinois Central Railroad tracks. His wife and children later were found safe in a freshly plowed field. Pankey added that the last time he saw his automobile, it was still sailing. Women at DeSoto, Illinois took up a collection along the line of automobiles that attracted to the scene, and in a short time had raised several $1,000s. Generosity then of the American public. Fortunately, we don't. Storms of that nature are relatively uncommon. F5 storms are extremely rare. To have an F5 strike a populated area is even more rare, but this is an example of what can happen when it does, and there's little, if anything, that anyone can do about it. Well, let's lighten up a little with what I refer to as the politically incorrect story of the month. Why this is news, I don't know, but here we go. Philadelphia Inquirer, March 8th, 1925. Philadelphia woman back from 12-year hunt. What on earth was she hunting? Well, she shot big game in Africa, Indochina, and Madagascar. I don't think you had any big game in Madagascar, but whatever there was, she was shooting it. After hunting big game with her husband for 12 years in Africa, French Indochina, Madagascar, and Himalaya, maybe she's shooting Yetis in the Himalaya, Mrs. M.W. Schaefer of Philadelphia arrived here yesterday from Hong Kong. She said her husband had been summoned to the States shortly after their arrival in November at Hong Kong, leaving her to pack the trophies. She's expected to join Mr. Schaefer here. I have no idea who these people were. I tried to research it, and they didn't come up as being independently wealthy or anything. I have no idea who the Schaefers were, and why they were killing all those animals. This story can be classified under the heading of Nothing Ever Changes, but it's one of the most honest assessments that I've ever seen with respect to current medical treatment. Here's the headline. Dr. Mayo, sure cure of cancer is inevitable. Science slowly but surely nearing conquest of scourge. Surgeon believes. Medical science is slowly but surely approaching the conquest of the last great scourge of the human family. But here's where he gets honest. This is where we really get a dose of honesty from Dr. Mayo. He made no thrilling prediction, which might bring relief and cure to the suffering of this generation or the next, but he spoke with quiet confidence of the strides that science has made, is making, and shall continue to make in the ceaseless, vigilant war against this disease. An optimist, he's giving an optimistic view, but a realistic view of how he saw the future of medical research, and it turns out that he was exactly right. Now, here's an article that speaks for itself. Ma Ferguson signs bill barring Klan. Ma Ferguson's Miriam Ferguson, two-time governor of Texas. Texas measure bans parades of masked secret societies. As you might be aware, the early 1920s was a time of revival of the Ku Klux Klan across America, and Ma Ferguson would have none of it. Austin, Texas. A bill prohibiting the wearing of masks in public was signed today by Governor Miriam Ferguson. It provides severe penalties for persons entering public buildings, churches, or private residences while masked. It was a Democratic Party pledge of the last campaign and resulted mainly from flogging parties staged by mass bands in Texas during the last few years, said Representative Holbrook. One section of the law, which becomes effective immediately, declares it unlawful for any secret society or organization or a part of the members thereof, masked or disguised, to parade upon or along any public road or any street or alley of any city or town in this state. Well done, Ma Ferguson. The next story is kind of Indiana Jones before Indiana Jones. Being an archaeologist or a paleontologist was a lot more risky back in 1925. Here we go. U.S. archaeological student shot in chest by bandits in Greece. Party hides in forest while car is robbed and then escapes across border. Dr. John Logan of Canesville, Georgia, was shot through the right lung yesterday by bandits who were holding up the automobile in which he and 3 other American students of the American School of Archaeology were traveling in southern Piraeus, Greece. The wounded man's condition is considered serious, but not necessarily fatal. That's a good prognosis. Serious, but not necessarily fatal. Hopefully he got the medical treatment he needed. Dr. Logan's companions escaped injury. After escaping from the brigands by speeding up their car, the students abandoned the automobile and baggage and hid in the forest. Later, the brigands found the car and took 3 cameras and some wearing apparel from it. The students afterward returned to the car and motored back to Arta across the Greek border. You know, this goes under that classification, I think, of people of the past who were just accepting of a higher level of risk in their life than we would be today. A risk through violence, disease, or exposure to the forces of nature. That was just more natural. It was just more natural to them to be exposed to such things, and they just went about their lives. Okay, last month we had the headline of the month concerning the Japanese pledge to never be at war with the United States. This is a good one too. Reich invited into League as ally for peace. Now this is talking about bringing Germany back into the League of Nations. League of Nations, of course, is the precursor of the United Nations, and, well, it was equally as ineffective. But here we go. The Council of the League desires to express to Germany its sincere wish to see her associated in its work and thus play the role for the organization of peace, which corresponds to her world position. Very optimistic crowd at the League of Nations. We're going to bring Germany in, and Germany's just going to be a force for peace. It worked out about as good as the Japanese prediction of friendship with the United States. Now, next story, it's a tale of loss and a tale of gain. In the Middle Ages, they had the concept of the Wheel of Fortune, that you constantly moved, and 1 minute you could be riding high, and the next minute you're riding low. There's never been a better tale than that. This story also demonstrates the ever-nearness of death in pre-antibiotic societies. Well, here's the first headline here. What have the fates in store for the world's wealthiest foundling? That's interesting. Millions of dollars in her own name and destined to be reared in the lap of luxury, yet Joy Louise Leeds knows nothing of her parentage and has been robbed by death of the foster parents who lavished their money and affection upon their little daughter. Here's the headline concerning the death of her father. Warner M. Leeds, vice president of the Leeds tin plate interest until ill health forced his retirement from business in 1904, died today of tuberculosis at his home here. He was just 57 years old and had been ill for 20 years. Now, they drop his name and talk about his tin plate interest. This was a story that was in an age when the public recognized industrialists by name. And the industrialists at that time were like mini heroes. A 12-year-old daughter, Joy Louise Leeds, adopted from the foundling wards at Bellevue Hospital, will inherit most of Mr. Leeds' fortune, estimated in the millions. So here's of our little discussion here. Joy Louise Leeds was a foundling at Bellevue Hospital, adopted by these wealthy folks, and is about to inherit the millions. But it's noted that she will also inherit the income from a $2 million trust fund, plus $250,000 and a fortune in jewelry from the former Mrs. Leeds. Get a load of this, who in February 1923, 2 years before, leaped to her death from a window of the home where Mr. Leeds and the young Leeds lives today. So she loses her parents, or is it put up for adoption? She's adopted by millionaires. Her mother, when she's 11 years old, jumps out the window to kill herself, and then her father dies of tuberculosis. Mr. and Mrs. Leeds were childless. Besides the girl Joy, they adopted a boy named David, who also died in 1918. Wow. There was opportunity, but there's also death. There's gain and there's loss. I tried to track down what happened to Ms. Leeds, and the only thing we can find is, it's evident. She's mentioned many times throughout the 1930s. She got married at the age of 30. She got married in 1931 when she would have only been 19. She got married to a socialite, basically what it says. They're a social leader. That seems to be a favorable occupation at the time. She's married to a social leader. She's at all the right events and balls. And the last time we see her is in 1947, when it's noted that the Leeds heiress wins Reno divorce suit. She divorces that gentleman, and as far as I can see here, doesn't remarry, remains a socialite for the rest of her life. But that leads us to the concept of divorce in Reno. I've gotten into a little bit of research with respect to that. I'm halfway through an episode. It's kind of fascinating why Reno becomes the divorce capital of America, which it did in pre-1960s America. Our next story is classified under the heading of lunacy. That's all I could think of. I couldn't figure this out, but we're going to roll through here. Headline, the Daily News of March 14th, 1925. Sailor roundup opens in effort to get fakers. They're going to round up sailors because someone's faking being a sailor. Police of the boroughs were busy yesterday rounding up all men wearing the uniform of the U.S. Navy on a request made to Commissioner Enright by Rear Admiral Charles Plunkett of the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Orders were issued to all policemen on duty yesterday afternoon and last night to arrest every man in sailor's uniform and hold them at police stations until the Navy Yard was informed and an officer sent to take them to the naval base for questioning. It is understood all leaves have been canceled. Never seen anything like that. They're going to arrest everybody in a Navy uniform. I didn't know people did this sort of thing. It was noted that imposters wearing the uniform have been responsible for frequent outbreaks of rowdyism in Brooklyn. I found another reason why they might have been rounding up as well. But what happened was that the next day, Rear Admiral Plunkett, in charge of the Brooklyn Navy Yard, has ended the police roundup of men wearing sailor uniforms. 65 were taken in to prove their identity. There were 65 non-Navy people wandering around with uniforms on in New York City. One of them is given a suspended jail sentence. It says here, for illegally wearing a sailor's uniform, Eugene Glass was given a 60-day suspended jail sentence in police court today. He was arrested last night at the Plaza by Patrolman Mitchell. At least he's at a good hotel, but why the heck is he at the Plaza dressed as a sailor? Well, here's what might have been happening here. This is the Clinton Daily Public of Clinton, Illinois, outside of Chicago. Suspect sailors with khaki bags arrested. Men appeared here selling furs. It's kind of part of a con scam thing here. What appeared to be another variation of fur salesmen, the kind that visited the cities a few years ago. Men wearing sailor uniforms and carrying khaki bags presented with a tale of how they had special methods of acquiring fine furs cheap and selling them the same way. It was noted that this was the impression that was borne by the appearance of the three men in Clinton carrying khaki bags over their shoulders and wearing naval uniforms. However, if anyone was stung, no report has been made. The fur gag is an old one now, and few would likely fall for it. So I suspect that the whole wearing of Navy uniforms was done to give the individual an air of legitimacy so that they could perpetrate some kind of con or scam on them? I don't know, but apparently there's guys walking around in sailor uniforms in New York and Chicago. I haven't seen anything like that in my lifetime. Here we go. Stepson willed $1.25. Donor tells him to buy a rope with which to hang himself. In his will, probated today, disposing of an estate valued at $6,200 or about $190,000, Cornelius G. Jones, late of Bridgeport, bequeathed to his stepson James H. Jacobs $1.25 to buy a rope to hang himself with. Jones, in his own handwriting, then goes on at great length to make some highly uncomplimentary remarks about this beneficiary's conduct. I wish people would do that more in their wills. There should be more humor injected into wills. These are too dry, formal, and depressing at most will readings. Here's another interesting. Goodness gracious, things happen back then that don't happen today. Leviathan purser held. What's the Leviathan? Well, Leviathan is a gigantic ship. The purser is the person on a ship at that time who's responsible for money. They would be the ones who would buy the supplies, pay the crew, collect the fares. They're the banker of the ship. Charged with attempting to smuggle $50,000 in diamonds. Before we get to the crime, let's look at the Leviathan for a second. Interesting, the Leviathan, it was a gigantic ship, 950 feet long. That's like 70 feet longer than the Titanic, and was built 2 years after the Titanic. However, it was originally built as the SS Fatherland. It's a German ship. Hard to believe the Germans were once involved in passenger ships, but as one would expect, well, they competed with the Cunard Line and the White Star Line, but their shtick was speed and efficiency. Hard to believe the German engineers would develop speedy and efficient ships. They weren't big on luxury. How the ship ended up in New York? Well, in World War I, it was stolen by the American Navy and used as a troop ship. It could carry 7,200 people as a troop ship. It would carry 4,000 passengers normally. After the war, it was recommissioned as a private cruise liner. It was refurbished and put in service. The ship, though, it was huge. I said it was 950 feet long. It also weighed 69,000 tons. That's 1.5 times the size of the Bismarck battleship. This is a gigantic ship. Even by modern standards, it's a big ship. Now, what happened to the purser? Victor DeCaro, purser of the Leviathan, was arrested today on a charge of attempting to smuggle unset diamonds valued at approximately $50,000. He was arraigned before United States Commissioner Boyle, and after waiving examination, was remanded to the Tombs. I had to say that sentence because I like saying the Tombs, to await the action of a grand jury upon his failure to furnish $40,000 bail. $40,000 bail is like $1.2 million in bail. You'd have to come up with the equivalent of $120,000 cash and then get a bail bond to cover the rest. I did the research, $50,000 in diamonds. What would that look like? A D flawless, so white flawless diamond in 1925 was trading at $500 a carat. So that would be 100 carats would be a hefty little package of diamonds here. So not something you would just accidentally pick up. The police expressed their belief that DeCaro was a carrier for an Antwerp merchant and that he was probably intended to dispose of his diamonds in New York. Well, you know what street he was going. He was going to 47th Street, where the Diamond District, and where he was coming from made perfect sense. Antwerp is the largest exchange of diamonds in Europe. This is what's funny. DeCaro's statement to Commissioner Boyle was that he believed the diamonds had been left on the Leviathan by Mrs. Alfred E. Smith, wife of the governor. Not only was he wife of the governor, Alfred E. Smith would go on to be the 1928 Democratic candidate for president, losing to Herbert Hoover. Governor Smith, commenting on the incident here tonight, declared, "Neither I nor Mrs. Smith nor anybody belonging to me ever owned $50,000 worth of diamonds." As a good Democrat, that's what he had to say. He probably had more than $50,000 worth of diamonds, but that's a story for another day. We're going out west on our next story, and this may in fact be the first person to die by way of selfie. What happened here was that a gentleman goes to the Grand Canyon, at least this is what one of the stories says, sets up a tripod to take a picture of himself. He starts backing towards the rim of the canyon, goes over the rim, and just as the camera takes a photograph showing him have extended arms and his eyes closed. That photograph exists according to all the different stories here. I have not been able to locate a copy of it here. However, it may not be that he died taking a selfie, because one of the other stories is that, well, I'll read from the story. From the article. Denver man plunged to death over rim of Grand Canyon. While posing for a snapshot on the very edge of the 700-foot precipice at Grand Canyon, Louis W. Thompson, age 40, of Denver, fell or leaped backwards. Thompson motored to the Grand Canyon with two friends. Arriving about noon, the party went walking along the rim towards Grandeur Point, about a quarter mile from the El Tovar Hotel. Please go. It's one of the great national park hotels in America. Thompson paused and called Miss Vivian Hess of Winslow to take his picture. The camera caught him in the act of going backwards with arms outthrown and eyes closed. It contradicts the earlier story, but it still gives an accurate impression of what may have happened here. Now, what happened to Mr. Thompson? The body struck a ledge about 100 feet down, rebounded, and finally lodged on the edge of the white wall, 700 feet below the rim. They had to go down and get the body, and after a few thrilling moments and narrowly escaping falling over the 600-foot white wall, Ennis and Cravey reached Thompson, who was dead on arrival. His skull had, warning, this is a lit graphic, his skull had been crushed and every bone in his body was broken by the terrific impact. Understandable given a 700-foot fall. But the next sentence is one of the lost marketing opportunities of all time. An Elgin watch on his person was still running and the crystal not even broken. I don't know why they had to put that in the article. But again, the Elgin Watch Company, I'm sure appreciated the plug. Remember that Timex takes a licking and keeps on ticking? This is like that times 100. The next story we have can only be classified under the heading of creepy. As a matter of fact, it's creepy, creepy, creepy. Every person attached to this story is creepy, and the circumstances are creepy. We're going back to Hollywood here. All right. We're dealing here with Lucille Rickson. Who's Lucille Rickson? Well, she's a little girl born in 1910. She initially becomes a baby model and she has a stage mom who's really pushing her to do all these sorts of things. Her parents divorced at 8, and her income, baby Rickson, became the sole source of income for the family and for the mom and family. She's offered a contract in 1920 at the age of 10 by Sam Goldwyn, and she moves to Hollywood. I don't know. It's just the idea of Sam Goldwyn dealing with 10-year-old girls. She's cast in a series of films, like 26 films from 1920 to 1923. She starts off playing children, which is appropriate since she's 10 years old. But here's where it gets really creepy. In 1924, at the age of 14, she starts being cast in what they refer to as ingenue roles. She's playing the girlfriend and the wives of lead characters. She's playing an adult at the age of 14. She always is playing characters that are much older than herself. She even wins an award. Along with Clara Bow, she was named by the Western Association of Motion Picture Advertisers a Wampus Baby Star. A Wampus Baby Star. She's 14 playing adults, and she's called a baby star. Being named one of these baby stars was thought to be an indication of future stardom. Along with her that year, Clara Bow also won one of the awards. She was filming in 1924 such films as Galloping Fish, where she played the wife of the lead character. At about that same time, she gets diagnosed with tuberculosis. She becomes bedridden. And in another creepy thing, in February of 1925, her mother, who's attending her in bed, dies of a heart attack and slumps over top of little Miss Rickson. 2 weeks later, little Miss Rickson dies. Here's the story that appeared in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch on March 14, 1925. Lucille Rickson, former baby film star, dies. She is said to have been the youngest leading woman of screen. Just insert creepy wherever you want it. Overwork caused illness. Again, creepy, mom forcing her. Lucille Rickson, baby film star of 1923, when she was just 16. She wasn't 16. We've got her birth certificate. She was 13. Said to have been the youngest leading woman of the screen, died here yesterday after a long illness. Her mother died last month. The young woman was one of the baby stars brought to the front by the Wampus, an organization of motion picture publicity men which annually picks a budding genius for the films. Insert creepy there. She had numerous engagements in 1924 and then was stricken with an illness brought on by overwork. Anemia developed. The family, consisting of her mother and little brother, of which Ms. Rickson was the sole support, faced reduced circumstances. Then the mother fell dead, and today the daughter died. I mean, you can classify this under parental exploitation. This is an example of that before, the Jackie Coogan story or any of the myriad of child stars that lost their fortunes. This is like stage mothering gone crazy and creepiness to the 10th degree. Today, everyone involved in this story would just be in prison. They would just round up the whole crew and ship them off. Well, we're in Hollywood. Let's go to a couple of movies, okay? Silent films are a little hard to take sometimes, but these are two really, really good movies. I read IMDb a lot and have if I'm going to look at a movie, I sort of have a number. If you get a rating, in my opinion, of 7 or higher in IMDb, then the movie is probably worth watching. If it's 6.9 or lower, it's almost without fail not a movie worth watching. And you got to realize IMDb skews young male. By that I mean that most of the people that are rating things on IMDb tend to be younger and tend to be male, so that action movies tend to do better. Superhero movies do better. War movies do better than will a drawing room comedy or something like that. So when you're looking at black and white movies, and when you're looking at silent movies in particular, to get over 7 in IMDb is incredible. And both of these pictures are 7.2s, which makes them, for their time, spectacular movies. The first that we're going to look at is Iron Horse. John Ford was the director of this, of Iron Horse in 1925. He's the director. Now, everyone should know this, but in case you don't, he directed The Searchers, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, Mr. Roberts, The Quiet Man, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, Fort Apache, My Darling Clementine, How Green Was My Valley, The Grapes of Wrath, Young Mr. Lincoln, and Stagecoach, and we'll stop there. Before 1925, he had directed 52 films. 52 feature films. He was turning out like 6 or 7 a year, but none of them were any good, really. And you go on IMDb, they're all 3, 4s, and 5s. This is his first real success, and this laid the foundation for his future, the first big Western that he directed, and it stands the test of time. Let's see what the ad says here. Thrills, throbs, chuckles, sobs. You'll never know another picture to tug at your heart like this one. William Fox presents Iron Horse, John Ford's Triumph. He did some nice things here in this movie. He cast Native Americans in the roles of Native Americans. He had Chief John Bigtree and Chris William Bird. They were the most prominent Native American actors in his film. But he didn't go and just make up Italians portraying Native Americans. He went with the real thing as a sign of authenticity. One of the crazy things, though, here is this film is premiering at Grauman's Egyptian Theater in Los Angeles. Now, Grauman's Egyptian was owned by Sid Grauman and was part of a trio of theaters along with the El Capitan and the Chinese. The Grauman Egyptian is the mid-sized one. The largest of them was the Chinese, the smallest El Capitan. Sid Grauman was a real showman, though. What he pioneered was a concept called the prologue. Now, this is a politically incorrect warning here. What he would do is before the film would begin, they would put on a show, sometimes outside the theater, sometimes inside the theater. It would be singing and dancing, musicians, acrobats, all in the theme of whatever the movie was, to get you ready to watch the movie. But can you imagine what was going on here with Iron Horse? Here's what the ad says. With Sid Grauman's prologue, that's what these events were called, 200 players, including big Indian tribes, Shoshone and Arapaho, brave squaws, and papooses. Don't think we'd be doing that today, but it must have been quite the spectacle. Library of Congress thinks enough about this film that it's in National Film Registry. It's been deemed worthy of preservation, as is our last film, The Lost World. Let's read the ad. Let's go right to the ad now. This ad comes out of the Palm Beach Post. The greatest picture ever shown in West Palm Beach. I can believe that. It's being shown at the Stanley Theater. Absolutely astounding. That's the only way we can describe it. Never before have you seen anything like it. Imagine a group of explorers discovering a spot where the foot of man never before had trod. In this group of men and women trapped, imprisoned in this lost world, where ape men roam, where animals the size of 15 elephants and flying reptiles of an airplane. Monsters of 10 million years are still alive, battling each other and this group of adventurers. The movie starred Wallace Beery and Bessie Love. It was directed by Harry Hoyt. But the real star, and it was adapted from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's 1912 novel of the same name. Arthur Conan Doyle is our Sherlock Holmes writer. The movie starred, as I said, Wallace Beery and Bessie Love, but the real star is Willis O'Brien. He's the special effects man. He pioneered stop motion photography. His best pupil was Harryhausen, who you would know from Jason the Argonauts and other films like that in the 50s and 60s. This film was 7 years before King Kong, but the effects are almost as good. Plot is as stated. It's on a high plateau in South America. There's live dinosaurs and other monsters of the past roaming about and battling everybody, and the film is actually very entertaining. It also gets a 7.2 on IMDb. It was, in fact, the first feature film to feature stop motion animation. It was received with universal acclaim, and again, it's a film in the National Register. Quite a sight. Well, that brings us to the end of our month here. It was a good trip, except for the tornado. We'll be back again next month, and in the meantime, there'll be, as we promised, there'll be several other special editions on specific topics. But from March of 1925 to you, I wish you all the best, and we'll see you down the road on our next episode. Take care. Olivia, can you play us out? Thanks a lot.